Scroll and Dagger presents The Pensive Tower. Episode 40. Cut Strings. Alright, there we go.
I'm sure that we don't need to do this now.
He's right, Paxton. You should go to the hospital.
We have to get this down. The longer we leave it, the more chance there is of misremembering or getting something wrong.
You were stabbed.
Yes, Szelia, I know. I was there. And you bandaged the wound quite nicely. I am in no immediate danger.
And you know that with all your years of medical training.
You should listen to Szelia, Ferox.
Hi, Librarian. You know I'm right about this. What happened here, I don't know why yet, but it was important. That thing, Alayne, it mentioned the Night Queen. I know that's probably nothing, but, well, the Tower Code does say that any mention of Lalesh must be put into the records immediately.
That code was written centuries ago. It's hardly still relevant.
I'm not so sure. We all think vampires are extinct, but I've seen an alarming number of accounts from the past 5 years that claim confirmed sightings.
And there was undeniable evidence of all of them,
Well, not as such.
Paxton.
All right, no. There was no evidence of a sighting besides the donated memory, but surely...
Paxton, I can see you've been upset by all this, but try to examine this logically. Vampires? There hasn't been a confirmed sighting of one of them in nearly 1,000 years. And the Night Queen? Do you really think that this is something that we should be concerned about?
Our visitor certainly seemed convinced.
It was probably lying to you.
I don't think so. It said that it was possible to make it through the maelstrom.
That should be proof enough for you that it was talking nonsense.
Well, even so. I still think we should get these details down now.
There's no point in trying to argue with you about this, is there?
No. No, there is not.
All right, fine. But take it easy. You did get stabbed.
It's just a flesh wound.
You need to keep the weight off your leg.
I will.
I'll go and call for an ambulance. As soon as we've done this, you're going to the hospital.
Fine. This is the memory of Szelia Tefari. Memory regards the attack on the Pensive Tower by the creature that called itself Alayne SinDreda. Inscribed direct from subject on the 16th of Calla, 730. Now, tell me what happened.
Fine. It all started just around midday. You were busy reading through some correspondences, so I thought I'd go ahead and get an early lunch. I began heading towards the canteen. On the way, I couldn't help but notice how nervous everyone was. I know everyone's been on edge for a while now, talking about weird dreams and funny feelings when they're alone. But it was more than that. There was actual fear in the faces of the people I walked past. At their desks, the underlibrarians kept starting in their seats as if they were hearing noises. One who was carrying a big stack of books suddenly screamed and dropped them. I and a couple of others ran over to her to make sure she was all right. Her eyes were wide and staring. She looked like she'd seen something horrific. I turned around trying to see what she was looking at, but there was nothing there. I turned back to the underlibrarian, but she was already running away down a side corridor. Then she disappeared from sight. And I mean that literally. 1 second she was there, the next. It was like she'd just been snatched out of existence. My hand went to my knife. I started carrying it not long after my first encounter with the thing. I didn't know if a knife would even do anything against it, but It made me feel better. I looked around, trying to see something, anything that might point to an explanation. A lot of people were still looking freaked out, but there wasn't anything I could see. Then, suddenly, everyone was screaming. At first, I thought more people were disappearing, like the underlibrarian, but then I saw they were being pulled down and dragged across the floor by what looked like metal wires. I didn't have much time to take this in as I felt a wire wrap around my ankles. There was a sharp tug, and I was down, on my back, being dragged across the floor. I tried to grab onto something, anything, but I was being pulled too fast. I looked back and saw I was being dragged towards a dark corner. Another of the underlibrarians was being dragged into that same corner, and I watched as they disappeared into the shadows. The last thing to go was his petrified face. And then he was gone. Completely disappeared. I didn't know what would happen if I was dragged into that darkness, and I didn't want to wait around to find out. Fortunately, I was able to not panic long enough to grab my knife. I'm not sure what good I thought it was going to do on a metal wire. It was just a simple knife, but I just acted on instinct. I was able to reach down and grab onto the wire that was wrapped around my ankles. I then swiped at it with the knife. The wire hissed, and suddenly I came to a stop. The wire carried on snaking back into the corner, leaving behind the piece I'd just cut off. I pulled it away from my ankles, but before I threw it away, I quickly inspected it. One end of it, the end I had cut, was melted. I got to my feet. Everyone else who had been there had been dragged off, but I could still hear their screams. And then I saw her, Alayne, the marionette. I felt my blood go cold. She was walking through the library. Well, not walking. You've seen her yourself now, so I'm guessing you know what I mean. She was drifting along while her legs moved, though her feet barely touched the floor. I ducked down behind one of the desks. I was sure she would see me. The wires that had grabbed everyone and me must have come from her, I thought, so she must know that I had cut one of them. But she didn't see me. She didn't even glance in my direction. I peeked over the desk. She was looking straight ahead, a weird smile on her face. I waited until she was gone, and then I made my move. I began running in the direction of the High Librarian's office. I figured that would be the best bet. The upper Vox is in there, and I thought, from there, we might be able to mobilize some kind of resistance. I was sure she'd gone in the other direction. I heard her footsteps go out of the room, off towards the west wing. But when I turned the corner out into the corridor, she was there. Just standing still, right in the middle of the corridor, staring straight at me. The candles guttered and died in their sconces. But unfortunately, I was still able to see her. She smiled. And it wasn't just an uncanny smile this time, it was unnaturally wide. I heard the cracking of bone and her mouth unhinged. I hadn't noticed when I met her the first time just how many teeth she had. I heard her laughing. Her snake-like jaw did nothing to affect the sound, which, to be honest, just made the whole thing creepier. I still had my little knife. Didn't really think it would do any good, but it cut the wires that had been holding me, so I lifted it and pointed it towards the thing in front of me. I think I was probably shaking. I didn't notice at the time, but thinking about it, I was that scared I was definitely shaking. The sight of the knife did get a reaction out of her, the marionette. It screamed, like properly shrieked at me. It was deafening. I had to force myself not to cover my ears. I knew if I got distracted, this thing would take the opportunity and I'd likely end up dead. So I blinked back the tears of pain and kept the knife up. The marionette charged at me with incredible speed. I thought I'd been wrong and she wasn't scared of the knife at all, but then, suddenly, she was gone. Just gone. And the corridor was empty. I whirled around, keeping the knife out in front of me in case she tried to get me from behind. But she was definitely gone this time. So I started running again, towards the High Librarian's office.
I imagine that was when she made her way to my office.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
I'm amazed I didn't hear any of this happen. You said there was a lot of screaming. How did I miss that?
Well, the mimigraphy department is quite away from the library, and you do tend to get oblivious when you're focusing on a project.
All right, fair enough. So, what happens next?
Honestly, not much. I got out into the East Wing and began climbing the stairs. It was eerie. Everything was so quiet. There was nobody else around. No librarians or under-librarians or security guards. No one. I guess they'd all been grabbed by those wires. It was only halfway up the steps that I realised the High Librarian might have been grabbed too. I don't know why it hadn't occurred to me. I guess I think of him as being so strong and smart that it's hard to imagine anything actually hurting him. But I had to wonder. Was I going to find nobody at the office? Was it going to be me, all alone? I had no idea what to do. I knew my knife could hurt that thing, but apart from that, I had no clue. Thankfully, I did not need to think that far ahead. Lord Edubarrus was in his office. He was bustling around the place as if he was looking for something. He had an Applebox speaker in his hand and was talking rapidly into it. I didn't catch most of it, but I remember he used the words Black Fang, and he said something like forces moving faster than expected. He turned as he heard the door opening. He slammed the speaker down and pulled something out of his pocket, something pale. It looked like a game piece or something like that. But when he saw it was me, he lowered his arm, put whatever it was back in his pocket before I could get a decent look. I started telling him what was happening, but he already knew. He said he'd seen some of the wires snatch Thoranya before he could help her. I asked how he'd been able to keep safe. He didn't give me an answer, just asked if I'd seen you. I briefly considered calling him out on it, but, well, it's not like I could make him tell me. So I just told him I hadn't seen you. He looked concerned when I said that, asked if I knew which way the creature had gone. That's what he called it, the creature. I don't know why, but the way he said that unnerved me a little. Anyway, I told him that I didn't, that I'd only just been able to get away from it myself. Lord Edubarrus nodded and told me to follow him. I did, and he led me back to the main part of the library. Everything was dead quiet now. I didn't know what had happened to the others. For all I knew, the High Librarian and I were the only ones left alive. I tried asking him about it, what might have happened to the others, I mean. But he just said that we should deal with the matter at hand first. I was going to ask him just how we were going to deal with things when I heard voices. I recognised both of them. The one doing most of the talking was female, and I knew it was her, the creature. But I also heard your voice. I couldn't hear what you were saying, but Lord Edubarrus began moving faster. That's when I heard you scream. So I started running. I saw you and, well, you know the rest.
Yes, all right. Thank you, Szelia. Could you ask the High Librarian to come in?
Sure thing.
All right, let's get to the bottom of this.
If you're going to insist on this, then we should be brief. The ambulance is on its way and you're looking pale.
Well, I am part Gellish.
Don't joke about this, Ferox.
Fine, we'll be brief. This is the memory of Lord Edubarrus deSull Jostellarte, High Librarian of the Pensive Tower, regarding the attack by the creature that called itself Alayne SinDreda. So what happened?
I was working in my office when the screaming started. I am not so far removed from the library proper as you are in your office, so I was still able to hear it. I called Thorania in to ask her what was going on. She opened my door looking like she had just woken from a nightmare, and began babbling about wires coming from the shadows to snatch people, and dead-eyed smiling people hanging in the air. Before I could say anything in response, something shot out and wrapped around her waist, dragging her screaming out of sight. As quickly as I could, I slammed the office door shut. I got to the Apovox and called for the lawkeepers. I knew we'd need some kind of backup. I was able to get through. I didn't tell them the whole truth of what was happening. I barely understood it myself, but I made it clear that the tower was under attack and we were in danger. And the lawkeepers promised to send a detachment right away. It was about that time that Szelia came into the room, talking about seeing that thing you've been talking about these past few weeks. The marionette. In truth, I hadn't given the matter much consideration. I didn't doubt Szelia was being harassed by someone, which is why I brought in the extra security. But I didn't really believe it was anything more than that.
Well, yes, I must admit I wasn't wholly convinced of Szelia's story when she first told it. In the following weeks, though...
Yes, indeed. The miasma that descended on the tower did make me start to realize the potential seriousness of the situation. And when I started to research the subject myself, that's when I made some very concerning discoveries.
Like what?
Like that there have been similar cases in the past. You remember the memory of Dr. Sintenga?
Yes. There was a boy, Ulvar Creek. Szelia said the way he was described reminded her of Alayne SinDreda.
The similarity was far too much of a coincidence. So I began preparing. I knew if such a creature came to the tower, there would be forces in play that we would not be able to match no matter how much security staff we had. And I had no doubt that they would come to the tower. They had already made it clear they wanted one of the memories.
Yes, the memory of Malin Gorwyn. I still don't understand why.
Neither do I. But there could be any number of reasons why a creature like that would want some information on someone who hunts monsters.
You think she wanted to track down the group Mr. Gorwyn was with?
I think it's a possibility.
Alright, so Szelia came and found you. She's told me much of the next bit. There is only one thing I am unclear on.
And what is that?
How you killed Alayne.
I think you already know.
I saw you use a glass candle, a candle made of clear glass. And I saw Alayne SinDreda burn in white fire.
So, you do already know.
How did you get it?
That, I'm afraid, is a question with a very long answer, and we do not have the time for that now. You need to go to the hospital.
My leg is fine.
Even so, I think it will make Szelia feel better if you went. And after all she went through to make sure you were safe, I think you owe her that much.
Very well.
I promise we shall speak more on this subject. There is much that you will need to know for what lies ahead.
What? What lies ahead?
That is a question with an even longer answer.
The Pensive Tower will return. The Pensive Tower is a podcast distributed by Scroll and Dagger and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 International License. It was written and directed by Gareth Cadogan and produced by Gina Moriarty. This series has featured Gareth Cadogan as Paxton Ferox, Gina Moriarty as Szelia Defari, and Will Stephenson as High Librarian Edubarrus. Sir Alayne SinDreda was played by Neptune Y.S. Samantha Alexine was Laurel Gavir. Morgan Lilly played Orion DeFanis, and Sophie Morgan was Alayne SinDreda. Artwork for the podcast was done by Cassie Shepherd, and original music and theme was composed by Evangelos Anastasatos. All other music by Kevin MacLeod. For more of his music, visit incompetech.com. If you have enjoyed the Pensive Tower, please consider following us on X @ScrollAndDagger, or subscribing to our Patreon for bonus and exclusive content. For more information on us and our future podcasts, visit scrollanddagger.com. Thank you for listening.